G'day and welcome to Earn the Right. Earn the Right is your go-to audio platform for building reputation-based authority in the marketplace. We're all about turning credibility into recognition and recognition into opportunity. We have 4 tracks. If you've been listening to the previous few episodes, there are 4 specific tracks, not really shows, but very specific tracks that are all interrelated, and they make up this audio channel called Earn the Right. Today's track is Crank the Third. Now, if you've been a long-time listener of this podcast, you'll know that Crank the Third used to be the name of the whole entire podcast, but now it is one track, and it's all about celebrating the wisdom economy. This is a world where depth, perspective, and lived experience fuel what's next. Crank the Third, this track, features conversations with inspiring midlife founders, solopreneurs, and professionals who are turning decades of know-how into opportunity. They're building meaningful ventures, shaping ideas, and designing work that matters. Today I'm joined by Karen Anson, and she is the founder of Ignite HR and Employment Law, that's one business, and Ignite Your Purpose, that's the second one. 2 ventures built on one powerful idea that compliance and compassion can coexist. Karen spent over 2 decades in government and workplace relations before making a bold midlife pivot where she studied law in her 40s while raising a family and eventually launching a thriving boutique firm. So we'll get into that in a minute. Her story is a really good one, and we're going to unpack how she's built a business that bridges law, leadership and purpose. So if you're someone who's got a few balls in the air, you've got multiple skills, and you're just trying to work out how do they all come together and how can you build a cohesive business around that, you'll get a lot out of today's interview. Thanks for joining us here, Karen.
Oh, thanks, Trevor. That was a beautiful introduction.
I'll try to give a bit of a taste, but not too much, because I want you to unpack it for us. But let's kick off, because you know, you've done what a lot of people have maybe thought about, or maybe they've done it in the past as well, and left a secure career. You were working in the government, and then you went back to study law in your 40s, as I mentioned, and founded your own firm. So that's a pretty big leap. Why don't you start us there? How long ago was that, and what sort of job were you doing, and what made you want to take that leap?
So thank you, Trevor. I worked for the government for a very long time, as a lot of people do when their children are small. They make choices about the working life around your children, which is whatever's the most secure. Absolutely always terrified of working for myself. Didn't have the confidence, didn't have the skills, had no idea. And it was funny. All of the things that I've done in my life were almost like stepping stones to where I got to. But it really also personally required me to, what I say, get out of my own way. And so what I mean by that is that I carried around with me, I guess, a lot of ideas about what self-employment might look like, negative ideas about, not having any ongoing income, because I'd always taken the safe choice.
Yep.
And it had limited my life to a certain degree. But so when I was in the government, I was given the opportunity to study, and I had some study leave, which sort of helped me balance my children's responsibilities. My husband had a very, very busy, very cumbersome kind of job, 6 days a week. He's a mechanic. He got to CEO level, and I guess my career always took second place in some ways. Mm-hmm. And so it was quite an interesting one. Was a few things that happened, and I thought, you know what, I really think I want to go back to uni. I didn't have the opportunity to do it. I'd done a few things, a few bits and pieces of study, and then I did a time management course, and this lovely guy from TAFE helped me unpack how in what I had never ever been taught before, which was goal setting. Believe it or not, until I was in my 40s, I had no one had ever sat and said to me, you can make a plan and then execute some steps and go there. I kind of just bumped between one thing and the next and never really had a goal or a plan. So, I ended up going and he showed me how to do a 3-month plan and a 12-month plan and a 5-year plan, and how I could fit in all of the things I needed to do university. So working full time, it took me 9 years to complete law, including the post grad stuff you've got to do to be admitted to the Supreme Court. And so finished that into 2012, I think it was, and then was straight out of uni. And after I'd finished, I actually got offered a job in aged care for a little while before I came to do my own practice. And the stepping stones from there, it was almost like I was in a marathon to get somewhere, right? Because you've got a degree, what are you going to do with it? I certainly wanted to make more money than I was making in the government, and so I went into the aged care industry as an employee relations person. And aged care is a ground for amazing opportunities in terms of everything from legislative changes that are constantly happening in Fair Work, with refunding, all of this stuff. So I sort of started working in aged care, and then I went after I'd sort of 4 years, I think I worked for an industry body, and then I worked in consulting for a few years after that and learned how to do proposals and work out how to work in salesy kind of area, because I'd never had that, and worked there for a few years. And then in December 2019, it was like the most clarity I've ever had. I need to work for myself. I couldn't. I loved working with a big team. I loved the idea, the mentoring piece and the leadership piece, and I'd learned so much, but I found it really difficult to be part of an organisation and see things that you could do yourself better, and not have that ability to be able to influence the culture of the organisation.
Yeah.
And, so it was with the most clarity, and then 3 months of tears, but the most clarity I've ever had was I need to go out on my own and start this consultancy on my own. And I was terrified. And my husband said to me, you are so accomplished and so confident. What the hell are all the tears about? I couldn't get rid of the fear of what the hell have I done to myself? Like, I don't have a plan. I did have a plan, but, I couldn't even I didn't know how to do a website. We had this conversation before we started. Where do you even start? When you've got all of that going on. And I now have coached a lot of my friends to do the same thing. And don't overthink it. You've got your skills. You know how to start, on LinkedIn and put posts out and network and do virtual coffees and do all that sort of stuff. The website can come. All of the social media stuff can come. Just start with the very basics is the way I look at it, and start getting a couple of clients in. And if you need to collaborate with people to get work, do it. Because a lot of people, I got a lot of referral work, and finding your sweet spot in terms of your hourly rate, how get yourself a good bookkeeper, that kind of stuff. The basics, start with the basics, and do what you do well. And that's why I would say.
Let's take you back to when you were at the government. What was the area you were working in then?
So I went from fair trading, like Department of Fair Trading. I worked for the New South Wales government, and then for whatever reason, I don't even know why, I saw a job advertised in industrial relations, and I had no interest in industrial relations at all. And it was just because it was Newcastle and it was not far from home, and I went and had the interview, and because I'd always done compliance, always had a compliance hat. That was my my thing, and went there and just thrived. I loved it. I loved that it was so political, but there's an element of it that is, which is my sweet spot, is the problem solving piece, right? And the thing is with employers, I was mainly working with employers at that stage, They are so there's so many rules and regulations in this area of our law that is so complex. And I just loved that unpacking it for them and being able to show them the way, because they're not sleeping, because they don't know if they've paid their staff right. They have no idea where to start with contracts. I mean, they're very good at what they do, but this is a very specific area of law that needs some attention. Once it's almost like a set and forget. Once you've got all the documentation, you need to review your pays and that sort of thing every year. But in all honesty, you can do a very good foundational for all small businesses if you're someone who's going to employ somebody, and very simply, and understand your obligations quite easily. But it's once you start to look, you're looking at the Fair Work Ombudsman and you're looking at all these places, and nobody agrees. The unions don't agree, the employer associations don't agree, the Fair Work Ombudsman who doesn't agree, got all these other people, So it can be confusing.
So as working that was in a government sphere, industrial relations, were you there? Was that part of educating businesses on what their obligations are and how they had to comply? Is that
Correct.
more so that, whereas now as a lawyer in that space, you actually helping them to comply, you're actually more in the weeds with them. Okay, so it's kind of like pretty much a sliding doors. You saw an ad, you went for it. It wasn't something that you knew much about, but
not really
it's
at
kicked
all.
you off on a whole new
It did. Every step. I mean, there's some elements of my life that is bumping along, and then other elements of it where I've been guided to go places or do things, and I feel that I was put there for a reason. And I know that I was put there for a reason, because the timing and the kismet of that actual in my life. So the Fair Work Act came in 2009. I was right in the middle of that sweet spot. So I was there working industrial relations when each of the states had their own industrial relations, and so when it became a federal system, I was right in the middle of that. So I worked for the government. We did a lot of education, and I was given a secondment to support a couple of projects, construction and the social community home care award, which is still an absolute nightmare. But I was there on the ground working with the social workers and the organisations that deal with NDIS and that kind of stuff. It wasn't NDIS then, but so I had a very fortunate opportunity that I was there when all of that was going on.
Lots of change.
Oh, and have watched it from that for 25 years.
Yeah.
15 years, sorry. For 15 years I've watched it, been involved in it. I've sat in those meetings at the Fair Work and where they do the modern award reviews. I've seen all of that, all of the changes, how it works in practice, and then come out the other side understanding how to help businesses understand it better.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people, maybe some people listening, that they work in areas of where there's great complexity, and if you can make complexity simple for the right people, or in your case business owners, then it's there's a business there, isn't there? In terms of when you're saying you studied for 9 years to become a lawyer, were you working as well? You said you had some sort of study leave, but you were basically juggling everything at that point.
Oh, definitely. And it was interesting because I waited until my kids were old enough to cook their own toasted sandwiches, and then I'd go. So Central Coast, I lived on the Central Coast, and I'd go up to Armidale. And this is incredibly honest. It was the first time I'd ever driven outside the local area on my own. I'd never driven. I used to get on the bus and take the kids to mum's in Queensland. I'd never stayed in a motel room on my own. I was in my 40s, for God's sake. I'd always had my family around me. And it was a really interesting time for me in terms of just bridging that fear, that stepping out of my comfort zone and leaving the kids, because the kids were my focus as well as my job. And so adding that layer of complexity is so funny, because my youngest son has been to university as a teacher, and he and I used to sit, because when you first start studying law, it's at the time we didn't have the online stuff 2012. It was still around, but it wasn't anywhere near as good as it is now. and I would write something, and I would say it out loud to my son, who was 12 at the time. And he'd say, what did I just explain to you? Can you tell me what I just said? And he'd feed it back to me. And the funny thing was, he did law or legal studies at school and got a really high mark. And I said, "You'd be an amazing lawyer." He goes, "No, I just want to be a teacher. I'm fine."
So, I mean, that is, there's some interesting things to unpack there, because I mean, you're juggling the motherhood. You've got your day gig. It sounded this was obviously part time, but you had to go to the university to do things.
Yeah.
Just for people who don't know where you live, and there's some people live listening to this from overseas. This is in Australia, on the east coast of Australia, and you're north of Sydney.
Yeah,
right?
About an hour and a half north of Sydney. So
Yeah.
the Central Coast, and then to go up to Armidale was probably a 6.5 hour drive.
So did you go up there for stints, like a weekend?
Holiday, yeah. Well, no, it was a week
Oh,
on.
a
You'd
week.
be there for a week, yeah. So you'd have to be. At the time, you did most things online, but I'm a kinesthetic learner, which makes it very difficult that I have to do things and teach things to learn it.
Yep.
So I'm not an auditory or visual learner. So I realised that I needed to, whilst I did the lectures online, I also immersed myself at the university most of the time.
Yep.
Which, I mean, when you've got a fixed income and you've got kids at home and a big mortgage and whatever, wasn't exactly an insignificant thing, because I had to pay for accommodation, I had to find the petrol money and the food for the week, and it was a negotiation with my husband, I have to say. We had
And
to.
how many times did you have to do that? That week-long journey.
Well, I did it for the last 2 years. Was the practical legal training. I went to actually ANU in Canberra to finish my studies, but it was once a term. I used to do three. I actually did 4 terms a year, because what I would try and do was do 2 subjects, and I'd get a bit of study leave around the time when you did your what do you call it, exams. But what would happen was, summer school, you didn't have to go on site. So I could do summer school in I think it was an 8-week term. So you could get a subject over and done with. I used to do the elective subjects in summer, the fun ones, just to try and make it a bit lighter, because I mean, you're doing contract law and all the heavy stuff, and so for example, I did a couple of really cool ones with other universities that you can go and you can apply to get an external. There's a really cool university up near Byron Bay that you can go and do. I wanted to go on site there, but I didn't negotiate that one very well. But yeah, so it was interesting. So 4 terms, I would try and do 2 subjects for each term, and then I'd do 1 in summer.
Yep.
And just kind of plugged my way through it. The funny thing was, at the very last subject I did, which was succession, and that was with ANU when they do the practical legal training, I failed it, my last subject. It was almost like, do you really want this? Do you really want this?
They have to dig in and do it again.
After 9 years, I couldn't believe I failed it, and it's the worst subject. I tried to get out of it, but they charge you anyway for it, right?
Yeah.
So then I had to redo it, then got charged again for it.
So it's investing in yourself, isn't it? I mean, this is 9 years of investing.
Well, I've
in
only just
yourself.
paid it off. I've only just paid the next one.
So in terms of, did you know at that stage you wanted to become a lawyer? Because you just said that earlier that you became a consultant and did some other types of jobs. Was that valuable to do that before you obviously went straight? Did you think you should go straight into law? Or do you think that these other jobs, consulting, maybe you obviously used your legal background, that helped you for when you became a practicing lawyer?
I was still unsure, to be honest. Even after I qualified, I was kind of given an opportunity to be a director in a company that was a HR company.
Yep.
And so I wasn't technically practicing. I had a practicing certificate and gave it up actually for a year, because I sort of thought, you're paying all this money and this insurance and everything, you're not really using it.
Yeah.
But then when I went back, when I finished at the consulting, I started the law firm, and really for a year I didn't really do much. Now I'm almost 100% practicing, but it's been an evolution, I guess,
Yep.
an evolution of the people, I guess my confidence, my skills, and the referrals that I get, because I pretty much, very few referrals. Other law firms in Newcastle refer me. I've got, I get a lot of referrals, but I don't get very much in terms of people marketing, in terms
Yep.
of the way that my clients find me.
Yeah.
I mean, my website's helpful because people Google me and they find me, but
Yeah. But
yeah,
you are still quite specialised.
yeah.
To start, how old were you when you started the law firm?
So
Right.
2019, I was born in 67, so what is 52?
Okay, so that's Ignite HR and employment law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I started with just Karen Anson and then went to Ignite, not
Yeah.
long after that.
So that's starting your first business
Yeah.
at 52, and not just starting your own business, but starting as a discipline. It's not as if a lot of people, I'd say most lawyers who start a law firm have been lawyers for years and
Correct.
years, and they've
Yeah.
seen how it works. And usually, like anyone in professional services, they start something because they think they can do it better than where they've actually been employed. I would
Yeah.
imagine that's when I started my PR firms.
Yeah.
Tell me, what's that like? I mean, day one, day one of hanging out your shingle,
Yeah.
haven't run a business before and haven't run a business as a lawyer. Walk me through that.
So, I mean, for me, it was really about getting clear on, what my hourly rate would be, making sure that my documentation, like spending, really what I needed to do was make sure that I had all of my precedents all ready, all the letters I needed, and it was daunting, but I had a big list of things that I needed. So every day, even if I wasn't doing client work, I was doing something towards the business at some
Yeah.
stage, and making sure that I had a good set of information for people. So, getting my proposals ready, making sure that I'd done, and just start having coffees with people,
Yeah.
talking to people.
Did you start with the client?
No, I didn't even have a client. No, and
How long? How long to find your first client?
Well, the problem is that my previous organisation tried to get me to sign a deed of indemnity to stop me. So I was dealing with a legal dispute when I first started, which made it very difficult for me. And this happens to a lot of people in different industries. If you're a specialist and you're a very key person in a professional services, because you're coming at it from the fear factor of your previous employer.
Yeah.
And also, the clauses in your employment contract. So I was dealing from that date till just after Christmas, actually, with a very serious legal dispute that I had to try and navigate my way through. But so that created a lot of fear for me in terms of, oh my God, don't get a website, all that kind of stuff. But in hindsight, I overreacted to that, because if this is the one thing that I learned about when I talk to people, when you go into that really negative place, and I say to people now, what would you, as someone who's advising you, say to you? If you're in this fear factor, but you turn it around, what would you tell your client to be worried about here? And what I would tell them is, hang your shingle out, do your best. If you do something that's going to breach your employment contract, you'll hear from them pretty quickly.
Yep.
And deal with it then.
Yep.
Don't let them bluster you into feeling like you can't
Yep.
do what
Yep.
you need to do, because you're entitled to use your skills. You're not entitled to ring their clients and try and steal them, but you can hang your shingle out and do what you can to make money. But you can't stop you doing that. And I think I think that's the one thing that I would have said to myself, and in hindsight, it was difficult because I felt guilty, I guess, too,
Yeah.
because I loved the job, I loved the people I worked with, and
How long
being
were
on
you there for? This was a law firm. How long were
oh,
you
it
there
was
for?
a HR company. I was there for about 4 years.
Okay. But you never really practiced law in a legal firm, did you?
No.
No. That's why I thought. Yeah, it's and tell me about straddling between HR and law. I mean, it's an intersection, and a lot of people have got different skills. They might have a vocational skill, and then they've got industry experience in a particular domain,
Yeah.
and there's a sweet spot in the middle, which you've clearly got. A Venn diagram was made for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've got the legal side, but you've also got incredible background in workplace relations and HR and that side of things.
Yeah. So
That must make life a little easier to niche in that regard.
one of the things that I often say to people because they don't really understand, I mean, HR is a big gambit, big, huge spectrum of things, everything from org development to the pointy end is the stuff I deal with, the employee relations stuff. So that's everything to do with industrial relations, performance management, all of the fair works spectrum of claims, bullying, all of that. That's my sweet spot.
Yep.
So, in terms of the way that organisations handle it, they often don't have an employee relations specialist in their team, but I think HR people should have a little bit of it to understand it, because if matters head that way, they can see the signs and they know where it is. So, I've been through, because I work for HR company, I work with a lot of HR people, so I understood. I'd work with the documentation around it and some of the ways that those issues are handled. Change management and performance descriptions and communication around expectations and things like that, and understanding all the very base documentation that employees need. So I did a lot of reviews in that space. I'd never had the opportunity, but the one thing that I did do when I had some very generous, very knowledgeable people around me, because they knew my background, they knew that I was gonna be successful, but I needed a little bit more help. So I partnered with a couple of different people, and one in particular was a very generous barrister who had just gone into the bar and had just joined a barristers group, and he and I kind of muddled our way through the first 18 months, I guess. So when I did do a couple of big legal cases in the first year and a half, which I'd never done before, but he guided me through everything. So as a solicitor, I learned how to do all of, for example, federal cases,
Yep.
how to put in applications and do all that kind of stuff. Because I did have a barrister that I worked with when I worked in aged care, who is now a Fair Work Commissioner, but he helped me with statements and making sure that we had witness statements and making sure all the documentation for court. He helped me with all of that.
Yep.
So I knew how to do it. And it was funny, the first year I left uni, I did about one unfair dismissal a week. It was a training ground, I tell you. You can't even imagine what that's like to deal with that and deal with all the different spectrums of matters you could possibly ever do.
So you're more. Am I right in saying you bring a consultative or a consulting feeling or background into law? So, there's a lot of lawyers that it's very compliant and, black and white and
I do
dot the I's and cross the T's.
Very few litigation matters.
Yeah,
99% of my stuff is settled out of court.
Right.
And, yeah. So,
and you're consulting, it's not just contracts or anything, but all the compliance, but you're consulting people on how to do employee relations better. Would that be fair?
Correct. Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that I get called on a lot, and quite often I'll get a board member from all different areas of business ring me and say we've got a real problem with our governance. With our CEO, for example, we've got issues. I'm known for being one of the best at navigating those kinds of matters in terms of problems between boards and CEOs, and doing investigations into, there's been communication breakdown between them, working out the personal and the legal, and helping people with exits for them in a safe way that doesn't create legal risks.
Yep.
And in a sensible way, because people are generally well-meaning. They don't ever deliberately, intentionally, most of the time, intend to make these relationships go pear-shaped. Mm-hmm. But when you get to a point where you've avoided something, you've addressed it, you've gone through all the gambit of all the things that you possibly try to do to fix things, and that doesn't get any better, then you get into a space where you can't sleep anymore. It's become too big, and that's generally when they get someone like me involved in trying to sort it out.
So let's shift gear a bit, because you've also got another business, and I said it at the top of the show, Ignite Your Purpose. Walk us through that, and then I want to unpack a little bit more. I want to delve deep into, how you've managed to have this extra business which is very different to your current business, to your main business. So Ignite Your Purpose, you're doing retreats and online programs. Walk us through that.
So it kind of is, but it kind of isn't. It came out of my dealings in aged care, and the issues that I'd been through, that I kind of touched on with my confidence and my inability to kind of back myself in situations where I needed confidence, and I was in my own way in terms of, oh, you can't do that. Why would you even think you could do that? That kind of thing, that kind of self-talk, and some of the programs that I'd been running in terms of my subconscious and the things that had limited my life. And so Ignite Your Purpose, I'd seen this, not generally always women, but sometimes in leadership positions, and they're faking it till they make it. You hear it all the time, and they're in a place where they haven't got good boundaries. They're doing too much. Their leadership is problematic, And so what I did was I put together the steps that I'd taken, and again, it was one of those things where I went to a retreat. Must have been 2020, I think, the first retreat I went to. So it's been 5 years now that I've been doing some of this work, and I did this interesting Himalayan breathwork session while I was on this retreat. It was an hour long, and I remember thinking after it, my God, people are crying, and it was just, and I'm sitting there thinking, Jesus, I didn't have that reaction. But it was trauma-informed breath work. So that was a bit confronting for someone who'd never done anything like that in their lives. And so I kind of went on a journey, and I started to look and research and find a lot of practices that really I love doing, and they really have changed mine, my husband's, my family's life in terms of being able to understand yourself and some of your reactions to things. So the things that get in your way in terms of your reaction. You know how you for example, you have a relationship with someone at work, and for some reason they trigger you, and you always have this reaction. You think, oh, I wish I could change the way I feel about that. I just can't change it. I don't know what it is. For example, that's an example. And so what I started to do was I did some courses online. I did 2 breathwork courses, and I use it in my everyday practice, because my thing is, most people are like this. Our brains just don't shut off. They don't stop. Mm-hmm. And it's relentless. So I get up every morning, I practice, I do a breathwork practice, I do some affirmations, and I teach it to other people. I even do it in my job as a lawyer. I say, look, I can see this is happening. So, for example, I do a lot of employee work where I know the worst possible things happen to them. They're in trouble. They've got a terrible investigation against them. They often in need of something. And so I don't necessarily provide them with that, but I hook them up with help of how to move on. Because if you do have a very difficult legal battle in your life, if anyone's ever had one, the war story is something that plays on them almost for the rest of their lives. It doesn't matter even if they had a good outcome.
Yep.
It's the trauma of it. And often people are dealing with trauma and they don't understand why they're in that situation. It could be bullying, it could be sexual harassment, it could be anything. So what I do is recognise as humans, we have a legal avenue, but there's also a personal, professional toll that it takes on you. So I've got actually my first overseas retreat in April next year. We're doing it's a leadership one in the Philippines.
You're running.
Yeah, I'm co-hosting with another girl that I've been working with in Victoria. I've done a few retreats with her, and amazing. And yeah, actually the reason that I went, like even December last year, I did a retreat up at Byron Bay at Crystal Brook. If anyone hasn't been there, my God, it's amazing. But I had for the last 12 months been just struggling in terms of I'd employed a lawyer, very good, but she didn't have the confidence to operate on her own. So I was kind of shadowing her the whole year, which financially was a really difficult year for me in terms of normally when you've got two people working, you have both of you earning money. The problem is that she struggled, so I was helping her with work and shadowing her with all the meetings, which means I couldn't make my own money. The two of us were working together. So in December last year, I went and did a retreat, and we did, some journaling, just time out from the reality of work to get clear on what I needed to do. And yeah, so I restructured my business. I now operate on my own. I use consultants when I need to. And with my legal AI, my legal software, I'm able to operate on my own and have more freedom, because for me, employees, for whatever reason, I'm too helpful. And
when did you did scale up at some point, or?
Yeah, I had 7 employees at one stage.
Yeah. And then you've now deliberately gone back to a solo practice, which is interesting and not uncommon. We do hear that, and I think particularly when you're younger and you're building businesses, there's something about growing, and you feel like you have to grow, and maybe part of it's ego based and that. But 100%. As you get a bit wiser, it's really what's going to work for you personally, and you design a little bit more around your lifestyle as well, so you're not you're not burning out. Walk us through that. I mean, what was it like employing 7 people? I mean, that's 7 jobs, 7 mouths to feed. I've done it. I know what it's like, and it changes. You're running an actual business with people, and obviously your employee relations side of things was pretty good, given that's your business.
Yeah, you would think so. Look, it was an interesting time, and in some ways, because of the consulting experience that I had, I watched the way that they had this theory, and I don't know if it works for everybody, but you take on any kind of work that walks in the door, and then find whoever it is that you need to do it. Right, so there's no plan as such. It's more about getting the work in and then figuring out a way to do it. And look, I'm great at doing it on my own. I can figure it out for myself. The problem is when you've got all these different personalities with all these different skills and different capacities for work. A lot of the industries that I work in, they're very difficult. NDIS providers we've got. Aged care, because there is so much going on in them.
Regulation, compliance,
and the
red
bullying
tape
issues, and oh my God, it's I'm doing a couple of sexual harassment cases at the moment, and they're tough going, because you've got to be there's so much legislation, but also case law that you've got to consider. And I always say, after I had the 7 employees, and I'm a very good mentor, and I'm very generous. So there's not a question that any of those people that work for me didn't learn something very valuable in terms of the way that they operate. Because the other thing that I know that I do well is that my clients have completely informed with every possible scenario that they could possibly, and the quality of the work for me is really important. So if I ever have to stand in front of a judge or a commissioner, I can absolutely guarantee that I've got an answer somewhere for anybody that ever want to ask me a question about why I did something, and the person knows that they've got the right advice, and so that was my hat. But what I wanted to create was a safe place, I guess. I didn't have one when I was a young mum. I didn't have a safe place that I felt like I could raise my kids and feel as if they were sick, I could have a day off, or be able to balance motherhood and work. Because back in those days, I was up at 5 o'clock in the morning, dragging kids in the dark to daycare and then picking them up at 6 o'clock. These days mothers have a much better go at it. They're able to balance it a little bit better. And financially, we just couldn't afford to do it any other way. So, I said to my kids one New Year's Eve, I remember we'd had a few drinks, and I broached the subject. I said, did I ruin your lives by dragging me out of bed every morning at 5? And they laughed and they said, no, Mum, you were the best mum ever. I'm like, oh, okay. Thank you. I'm not sure that was true, but anyway, I mean, every mother and father that's done it, there's always this element of guilt, because I would have liked to been able to be a more hands-on mum, but I just didn't have the opportunity to do it. So what I wanted to do, I had a lot of young mums working with me, and I was able to give them the opportunity to work, but also have that balance. And there was no question if the kids were sick, you would just look after your kids. Don't worry about work today. We've got this, that kind of thing. I wanted to create that safe place. But does that make for a good business? Not a great business model. But there was good times and bad times within within that time.
But also today, and you mentioned you do stuff with AI, and that's what it's geared to do. I mean, I guess people who have been 3 decades in business, or got the nous, got the experience, got the intellectual capability, track record, and yes, if you want to grow a business and you want to employ staff, that's fine, but you don't need to as much today. That it's a lot easier to survive, not just survive, but thrive and grow. And there's a lot of people building amazingly big businesses with them and one or two other freelancers, and because people are contracting. You bring in consultants and contractors, and it's the new way of working today is just awesome, because not only you've got that flexibility with human resources, with real people who have got expertise, but you've got AI that could cut down on a lot of the mundane stuff.
I'll give you an example. Like, if I do a board report, it used to take me half a day. I can do it in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Because my legal software records all the matters. Yep. And then what I do is I have trained it now to, for example, with aged care, understand the aged care standards and how each of those things that I've dealt with during the month, so that from a governance perspective, the board can see in terms of their HR, for example, because I do outsourced HR for a couple of large aged care facilities. And they don't have in-house HR at all, because they're regional, they're, Victoria, on the border of New South Wales, places like that. And I can do that all on my own. I do all of their meetings in terms of, their performance management stuff. I do all of review all the contracts. I've got someone in-house inside that's doing all the admin side of it. But, speak with the CEOs, do all of that, meet with them once a week with the leadership team. And put that layer of employee relations, HR over things. We do training, we do everything. I haven't left my office to do any of those things, and AI is helping me with the ability to be able to provide good quality reports that are compliant. It's
almost like you're a fractional HR person as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Fractional. So let's tie this up, because there's a lot of elements. Thanks, Karen, for sharing these, because people listening, and they're probably thinking, well, you're told to niche, and you have got a good niche, but then your business model is you're training people, you're a fractional, HR person in a regards that you're a purist lawyer as well, and can offer the legal advice and that side of things. And if it has to go to court or negotiations and do what a lawyer does, you've got the ignite your purpose and the bit more of the passion project on the side that fits
That's
nicely
my
under.
retirement plan, Trevor.
Sorry.
My retirement plan. So I've got two things. One is I'm going to run retreats. I've just learned how to do sound healing. Actually, I did it on the weekend. And the other thing is directors' positions.
Yeah.
So I'm strategically
yourself.
Yeah, to be a director in companies.
But the model, a lot of people say, oh, if you're a lawyer, you have to do legal things, but you're doing other things on top and around it, and training and consulting, and you've got, because you're now doing it by yourself, you can cherry pick the things that you want to do and where you can add the most value, and building it. You're not just reliant then on one source of income or one type of income in case you don't want to do that
anymore. Bali, like I did the other day for 10 days, and do it from Bali.
Yeah. It's a great story, and thank you for sharing, because I think it's people who have got the skills, they can do this sort of stuff now, and it's albeit while I look more about the building people's reputation and their personal brand and how that fits into their overarching business, but there's so many elements that come into play for when we can now grasp all the tools and the technology and work remotely, and if we wanted to, or we don't have to, we can go there and build a business and do whatever. So the opportunities and the pathways for people who have got depth of knowledge is terrific today. If people want to talk to you further about either side of things, the Ignite HR and Employment Law, or the Ignite Your Purpose business, you're easy to find online?
Yeah, just Ignite HR and Employment Law. I've actually got a link for Ignite Your Purpose on that. I've tied the two websites together. And so, Ignite. And if you click into my website, there's the very first thing that pops up is a free 15-minute consult.
Yep.
Anybody can have that opportunity to take that. And I did a couple this morning before I even started work early this morning. People just click in, and because I quite often asked to speak with podcasts all over the world, so I've got quite an interesting following on LinkedIn at the moment, which is I'm watching grow organically. But so anytime they've got times of the day, Monday to Friday, they can click in and 15
and connect
minutes.
with you on LinkedIn. I'll put a link in the show notes.
Absolutely. Perfect.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Karen.
Welcome. Thanks, Trevor.